Chapter 14. As Wilder slowed his pace, he stopped and sauntered into the hospital. Robert had arrived there minutes earlier. He had taken all the bullets out with the help of the young doctor. Wilder stood in the doorway, looking at Lycell lying on the bed, not moving, vulnerable to all around him. Robert glanced up at Wilder and said, "Come in." He strode close to the bed. "I never thought this would happen to Lycell." Robert walked around the bed, stopped to check Lycell's pulse. Robert looked up at Wilder. "He's breathing." "Who would shoot him?" Wilder questioned, now wanting an answer. "I always knew it would happen. You know him. He's been a hothead since I came into this family. And his sons, well, that tracker is the worst." "All right, Robert. I know how you feel about Tracker. Where is Sadia?" "You don't know how I feel. I brought all the young Samses into the world, and I don't want to see what happened to Lycell happen to his sons and yours." Wilder walked close to Robert and gave him a pat on the back. Wilder had him wrong on many accounts. His concern was like that of a father for his children. Sometimes his words were harsh, but that was Robert's way. "She just left to give Tracker the news. Do you know she's staying at that apartment in town with Tracker? That is, until he decides to wake up one morning and get on that motorcycle of his and leave my daughter pregnant or worse, like all Lycell's sons plan on doing." "You don't know that, Robert. Don't be so cynical. I can tell you one thing, if another one of Lycell's sons refuse to marry my girls, I'm taking them away from this town. They need to be where they can mate. Maybe go back to Alaska, to Mina's family. They will take us because they need females who can reproduce." "Think about what you're saying. Is that the kind of life you want for your girls? You know how they treat war females in that clan. The so-called alpha wolves have hundreds of mates, and when the war females get too old to reproduce, they discard them. They are impregnated right after they give birth to one litter." Wilder didn't want to lose Robert as a doctor and as a friend. He painted a stark picture which Robert could see and understand. It wasn't a life Robert had wanted for his daughters, and because of Lycell's sons, the bond between Robert and the Samses were in jeopardy of being broken. Turning to look at Lycell, Robert glanced up at Wilder. "Finally he's coming around. I thought it would be sooner." Wilder and Robert gave out a relieved sigh. Lycell's eyes opened. "What's going on here? Why am I in this bed?" His voice strained and hoarse. He made a move to sit up, and Robert placed his hand on his chest, preventing him. Normally that wouldn't stop Lycell, but he appeared weak and disoriented. He held the bandage on his head and blinked his eyes. "Just as I suspected, difficult as usual." "You have to lie still, Lycell," Robert said. "Who is this Lycell you're talking about?" Robert's eyes wavered to Wilder, back and forth. "Will someone answer me?" His voice weak but his meaning strong. Wilder crossed at the foot of Lycell's hospital bed, moving to the right, standing opposite of Robert. "I assume you're the doctor," Lycell said, peering at Robert, "but who the fuck is he?" "Your brother, Wilder." "I know nothing about having a brother." He paused to gather his thoughts. His forehead wrinkled, his eyes closed, his mouth opened slightly as if trying to retrieve information that was lost. "All I know is that I may have a wife. She's slender with green eyes and long auburn hair. I can see her now. I know that much." "Is she my wife?" "Yes, in a matter of speaking," Robert answered. "I want my so-called brother to answer." "Wouldn't he know about a wife if he's my brother?" Lycell said to Robert, and then turned his attention to Wilder. "Wouldn't you know if the woman I described is my wife, if you are my brother?" "Yes. I would know. And she is your wife." He didn't think it was wise to tell him she was the wife to him and Drayton. He didn't know if the loss of memory was permanent. But he did know that it could be dangerous to his family and pack if he gave Lycell too much information and he never regained his memory. Then where is she? Did you at least call her before you started working on me? He said. Wilder answered because he didn't want Robert to anger Lycell. Robert was more or less sour on Lycell and Tracker, and he might say anything. Yes, she was informed, but she's pregnant. Robert looked to Wilder. He knew Wilder was going down a slippery slope with Lycell. Lycell wasn't the most rational werewolf in the Samsa pack. In fact, he may have been the worst yet. Even his sons didn't have the temperament Lycell had. And when it came to Adrienne, he was single-minded in his love and devotion to her. Not to mention his jealousy, which even he knew had gotten out of control. When will I be able to see her? I don't want to harm my babies. Robert's eyes swung to Wilder. Wilder was always the one to sacrifice, and once more he would be put in that position until a diagnosis of Lycell's condition had been given. Robert glanced at Wilder, and then looked at a satisfied Lycell. He had a look of a man who had just enjoyed a perfect dinner. Lycell, I need to talk to your brother. Why can't you talk in front of me? Robert never won to give in to Lycell because of his feelings concerning his sons, and he said, I'm the doctor and you're the patient. If you're going to get well, you need some rest, and I'm not at liberty to explain anything to you at this time. He turned with Lycell's suspicious eyes following him, gestured and patted Wilder's back, and led him outside. Closing the door behind him, he said, How long are you going to go on with this charade? I can't risk him knowing too much about the pack. He's not himself. You can see there's something wrong. Do you know anyone that can give me a diagnosis of his problem, and how long before he gets his memory back? I would have to call a friend I know in the neurological department at Berkeley. I think I can count on him to keep your secrets. You have to be sure, Robert. I can't be completely sure. Just like you can't be sure that Lycell will understand in the state he's in, that those are your babies you allowed him to think is his. It wouldn't do any good to tell him now and confuse him, Wilder said. As soon as the words crossed his lips, he knew he had made a mistake. Just how much he didn't know. But he would soon discover. When Wilder looked up, he saw Adrienne through the glass windows across from the nurse's station. She was hobbling past the stables and headed to the hospital. He had to stop her. He dashed down the hall past the nurse's station and out the door and caught her just as she was entering. What are you doing out here? It's too cold for you. Think about the babies. He placed his arms around her, and he could feel her shudder from the cold breeze of winter whipping through the trees and settling on them. It didn't bother Wilder, but he knew even if Adrienne protested, she was fragile. I want to see him and be with him. You have to understand, Wilder. It was you who had convinced me that I could love Lycell too. Even as I objected. You knew I could love all of you, and you were right, Adrienne said, her voice soft and tired. He stopped and pulled her into the stable to get her out of the way of the strong cold breeze. Stop. I know what I did. I did it for the good of the pack, and I haven't regretted it, well, not lately, but Lycell is not Lycell. What does that mean? Her eyebrows rose, staring at him confused. He can't remember anything. What about me? She raised her voice and tried to pull away from Wilder to go to Lycell, but he held her close. The horses, who at first were asleep, became disturbed. They stomped and whinnied. That noise woke the dogs in the kennels, and they in turn began barking. We have to get out of here. Let's go back to the house. I can explain to you what's going on with him. He wrapped his warm arms around her, and they walked outside. You shouldn't have come out in this icy weather. I'm going to turn around and go in there to see him, unless you tell me what's wrong with him. He can't remember anything. Not his name. Nothing. But you said he remembered me. He doesn't know your name. He described you. I have to go to him and make him remember, she said, breathless as she looked at Wilder, and she held on to his arms with both hands. "I'm afraid that will take time. Now I can't tell him too much. I don't know how he will accept it or how he will react. He assumed the babies you're carrying are his." "No. No, you didn't tell him that, Wilder." She grabbed Wilder and held him around his neck. She lay her head on his chest. "I never knew how generous you were until now. How could you do that? If Lycell was in your place, he would never do what you just did." Adrienne kissed him. The pleasure from the kiss pure and explosive. How she wished she could please Wilder tonight. But she would please him in a different way. A way that wouldn't harm the babies. She would lie next to him and take his hard, warm manhood and thrust it in her mouth. Hard from all the nights he just laid behind her and found satisfaction with putting it on her behind and holding her stomach. Now he would protest because the pups were due any time. Nevertheless, she desperately needed to taste the milk of his hardness in her mouth. "I know it was wrong to lie to him, and he wouldn't have been as charitable to me, but he's not in my place and I don't know how he would behave. He's a Samsa, and he would do whatever was good for the pack, and that's why until he is fully able to understand, we can't tell him. He thinks he's a man." Wilder gave out a sad chuckle. "Oh, Wilder. That's not good." She shook her head. "I know. But what's the alternative? Tell him he's a werewolf when he doesn't know or believe there is such a thing?" "I guess you're right. But you have to take me to him. I have to explain some things that maybe only I can." This time Wilder knew Adrienne would be more persuasive than him. Wilder helped Adrienne from the stable and back to the hospital. Wilder stood and watched as she ambled in the direction of Lycell's room, after she waved to Robert. Robert hurried to her. "Be careful what you say to him. He may not know who he is, but he hasn't lost that arrogant, hot-tempered nature." "I'll be careful." She kissed him on the cheek as Lycell raised his upper body to look at them through the window. When she stepped into the room, Lycell's face changed from pain and anguish to happiness and delight. "You're married to me?" "Yes," she said, soft and warm. "No. I can't believe a beautiful woman like you would put up with someone like me." "Well, it helps that you are rich and was the most eligible bachelor around. Well, including your brothers. You know you are triplets." "I didn't know that." "You mean I look like that handsome devil who entered my room earlier, saying that I was his brother? And there's another one too. And we all live here on this estate." Lycell sat there confused and not believing much of what she said. "It must be difficult. Families are notorious for not getting along. Where are their wives?" "They don't have wives." Adrienne paused, trying to figure out how to break the news, and there was no way to do this, so she didn't say anything. She kissed him instead. She leaned over him and their lips touched, and he felt the melting softness of her lips. Then her erotic tongue moving in his mouth excited him. He could barely contain his lust for her. It was a long, heated kiss. It was a long, hard kiss, and it was a long, loving kiss. Lycell kissed her like a young man who had found love for the first time, and he didn't want to let it go. Then he rubbed her stomach. Adrienne pulled away. She pulled away not because she had to go, but because she felt as if she had betrayed Wilder by allowing Lycell to embrace her as she was pregnant for him. But all had changed, and she was trying to ease Lycell into learning about their lifestyle, and that he was indeed a werewolf. He would need to take baby steps, and Adrienne would need to feed him information a little at a time, and even then, there was no guarantee he would get his memory back long enough to accept the reality of their lives, that he was a werewolf, and that Adrienne had become a mate to all three brothers, and he couldn't have her whenever he wanted her during the full moon. As Lycell was settling into the idea that a beautiful, desirable woman is his wife, and he couldn't wait for her to have his babies, where he could fuck her, Tracker had claimed Sadia and was ready to move on.